It was raining so hard the windshield looked like a watercolor painting. I pulled into the daycare loop, engine ticking as it cooled, and my phone vibrated against my thigh. I unlocked it with a cracked thumb and read the message without thinking. I'm moving to Dubai with Claire. Transferred the savings. Good luck with rent. That one sentence felt like a blow to the middle of my chest. For a second, I couldn't breathe. My son climbed into the booster seat behind me, humming a cartoon theme, oblivious to the storm outside and the one that had just opened inside me. I smiled at the teacher through the rearview mirror, like everything was fine, handed over the signed pickup slip, buckled his straps, and kept my voice steady when he asked for juice. Inside, I was walking a tightrope over a canyon that had opened overnight. If you want to follow what happened next, subscribe. I'll share updates. I was 34, a freelance set and graphic designer who had shifted my schedule to be home when my son was young. After his birth, I took fewer jobs and accepted smaller pay to make room for midnight feedings and endless laundry. Christopher and I talked about it like you talk about dinner plans. It was an agreement, a trade-off. He had a steady job at Horizon International. He was the safety net on paper. I believed that was still the case until my phone told me otherwise. That afternoon, I did what anyone would do. I called the bank. "There's a transfer out of your joint account," the rep said. "It cleared 3 hours ago. Do you have the transfer details?" My hand shook as I scrolled the mobile app. The account balance showed a figure that was supposed to be our cushion for months. Rent, daycare, a summer of camps, reduced to a number I couldn't reconcile with my life. The rep read the transfer reference aloud, a Dubai recruitment agency. My heart started a steady, toxic hum. I tried to call Christopher. Straight to voicemail. I texted. No reply. Then another message came through from an unknown number. I left the keys on the table. Don't bother coming by. It was unsigned. The house suddenly felt enormous and hollow. Bookshelves meant for his novels, and the vase I bought for our first anniversary looked like props in a home that could be packed into boxes overnight. 100 small domestic things, his toothbrush, the coffee thermos, the toothbrush holder with our son's faded stickers, became evidence of a life that could be dismantled in a text. That night, I did what I had always done in moments of crisis. I tried to be practical. I called our landlord to explain I might need a few extra days for rent. Her voice was sympathetic but factual. "We need funds by the 5th. I called the daycare to tell them our boy would be picked up a little early tomorrow. The woman on the line offered to put his name on the emergency contact list, a kindness that felt like a tiny raft. Sleep that night was shallow and punctuated by the hum of the dryer and the boy's small breaths from the monitor. I replayed our life like a film. Small redundancies, late-night emails, his birthday last year when he had been oddly distracted, the way he defended his mother whenever I raised concerns. I found comfort in the logic that some answer would arrive by morning, that this was a break, a mistake, a miscommunication. But the bank's notification had already started to teach me a new vocabulary. Wire initiated, cleared, offshore beneficiary. In the morning, I said goodbye to my son at the daycare, with a tight-lipped smile and a promise to pick him up at 5. Then I went to the office of Horizon International and asked to speak with HR under the guise of a routine question about the benefits package. The receptionist led me into a small beige room with posters about wellness and unpaid leave. Lucia Vega from HR sat with a folder and a look that moved from polite curiosity to guarded concern as I explained that Christopher had not come in, and I had reason to believe he'd resigned. "Christopher submitted a notice of resignation last week," Lucia said. "It listed personal reasons and a last day this week. He also filed a transfer request to the Dubai office 2 weeks ago." 2 weeks ago. I stared. 2 weeks ago. Months of secrecy wrapped in the mundane paperwork of a job transfer. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table while rain drew tracks down the window. I opened the laptop we still shared. The cursor blinked on a document labeled TP Custody Plan Final Draft. I clicked, hands cold. The document was written in a clinical, precise voice that cataloged my struggles, the postpartum mood that had shadowed the first year of our son's life, casting them as evidence that I might not be the primary stable caregiver. It included language suggesting supervised visitation and proposed a plan for the child to accompany father overseas for 6 months with return flights every 3 months. The name Margaret, my mother-in-law, appeared in a line about financial facilitation. My hands went numb. I had confided in Margaret before, the soft-voiced woman who brought casseroles the week after our son was born. I had never believed she would be the person to sharpen a knife and hand it to me. The first proof for me was a birthday card tucked into a desk drawer. The handwriting was Christopher's, warm, sarcastic, thanking Margaret for helping with a little something for the deposit. I had helped coordinate that birthday, wrapped the present, and felt smug and grateful for the family that helps. That small, ordinary act was now part of a ledger I hadn't been permitted to see. I went into detective mode because I didn't know how else to breathe. I called our bank again and pushed for paper trails. I dug through email threads, looking for the dates and references I'd been blind to. I found hotel receipts, late-night bills charged to a corporate card, dinners with C&C at a restaurant with a seafront view in a city I had never imagined would be on his radar. I found an offer letter saved in a drafts folder addressed to him. Position, Senior Ops, Horizon International, Dubai. Date signed 3 weeks before the text. The transfers were consistent. A series of wires over the last month, small at first, then larger, culminating in a bulk transfer routed through an intermediary bank into accounts traced to institutions in the Cayman Islands. The bank rep used the word complex, which I translated as purposeful. The transfers had been authorized with his login credentials from home. There were browser histories and timestamps that suggested he had logged into our accounts late into the night. Then there were the little human betrayals that sharpened the edges of the paper trail. A photo on his phone, hidden in a folder named Work, showed him and Claire at a rooftop bar. Her smile was wide. His arm was tight around her waist. There was a text to a number I didn't recognize. Flight booked Dubai, see you in a week. The dates lined up with the resignation and the wire transfers. I remember thinking about the times I had told him I was tired, how he would say, "I'll take care of it," and how those words had settled into my bones like bedrock. Now the bedrock was gone. At this point, friends were lifelines. Sam, who had known me since grad school, showed up with a thermos of coffee and a look of that particular fury that people who love you get when they see you being wronged. He sat with me while I cataloged receipts and screen grabs. "You need a lawyer," Sam said, matter of fact, "and copies of everything. Every message, every transfer, every receipt. Freeze whatever you can." Anna Gwynn was the lawyer we found, smart, brisk, and the kind of person who made you feel organized just by speaking. She listened to my story, then asked for evidence. We put together a stack of documents that leaned like a dam. Bank statements, screenshots, the custody draft that looked like it had been written in secret, the resignation, the offer letter drafted in his name for the Dubai position, and the birthday card with my handwriting on the envelope. Anna explained, in a sentence that would become a map for the next weeks, what we could ask the court to do immediately. "File for an emergency order," she said. "Request a forensic accounting and a temporary order for full custody. Put a freeze on the accounts while we trace transfers. We can ask for supervised visitation only if the court thinks it's necessary. But right now, we need to keep your son safe and secure the funds to keep you housed. Freeze accounts, temporary full custody, forensic accounting." Those words, when said by someone whose job was to move the gears of law, became actionable. Anna explained simply, "A freeze stops anyone from withdrawing or moving money while the court looks into whether transfers were improper. It's not a final judgment. It's a pause button to prevent more damage." We filed the emergency motion the next day. There was a small clinical urgency in the clerk's office. Stamps, ink, the murmured exchange of numbers, and then a hearing scheduled for 3 days later. In those 3 days, life ran on 2 tracks: the ordinary logistics of feeding and ferrying a child to school, and the extraordinary late-night calls with Anna, a flurry of subpoenas, a slapdash forensic request to the bank's fraud department. A new contact appeared on my phone. The number showed Claire. My mouth went dry. She said she couldn't sleep and needed to talk. I remember every thud of that moment, the surrealness of the woman who had been in the texts now holding a line to me. "I'm scared," Claire said. Her voice was thin, and I could hear a plane or traffic in the background. I didn't know about the offshore stuff. I thought it was just us, but I found transfers too. I don't want to go to Dubai. I want to do the right thing. Her cooperation came with conditions. That's how these things work. She offered bank statements and screenshots. Anna negotiated an immunity agreement for a narrow civil context. Claire would provide an affidavit and produce documents that supported our account of transfers and a custody plan. In return, Anna would recommend she not be criminally pursued based on her cooperation. Language hedged, cautious, and precise. Claire wanted to be truthful. She was scared of Christopher, but also of the fallout to herself. That night, after Claire sent through the screenshots, I sat in the kitchen and held my son's stuffed dinosaur. The world felt split between the small heat of his body at the edge of my pillow and an endless procedural cold: affidavits, petitions, subpoena returns. I thought about the ways women are judged for choices made under pressure, the assumptions that a woman must have been naive, that she must have missed something obvious. The truth was messier. Secrecy can live beside kindness for years. Parent relationships, I learned, are rarely binary. We arrived at court on a gray morning that smelled like the city after rain. Courtrooms are acoustic traps. They take noise and make it solemn. Anna sat next to me with a legal folder that contained the story of the last month in numbered exhibits. On the bench sat a judge who looked as if he'd read many pages of grievance that week. Anna outlined the narrative precisely. She didn't use the word betrayed in the way I had used it in my head. She used unilateral transfer, undisclosed offshore accounts, and proposed relocation that appears to have been planned. She presented bank statements that showed the large wire out of our joint account, drafts of the employment offer, text messages, and Claire's affidavit. She explained why the child should remain with me: continuity of care, presence of support system, the fact that Christopher had left without discussion, and that the transfers threatened our immediate ability to provide housing and childcare. The judge listened, flipping through the exhibits with practiced impartiality. Then he asked a question that felt smaller than the problem, but more direct. "Ms. Elena, can you explain how your son's needs will be met if the accounts are frozen?" That's the way courts think. Practical problems need practical solutions. Anna had anticipated this. She proposed an interim support plan: freeze the disputed funds so they can't be moved, but allow a narrow, supervised release of enough money for rent and daycare pending forensic accounting. She asked for temporary full custody, citing the custody plan we found and the apparent attempt to relocate the child without consent. She asked for supervised visitation for Christopher unless he proved his intent to cooperate with the court's orders. The judge granted the emergency motion in part. He signed an order to freeze the joint account pending further investigation, issued a temporary full custody order in my favor, and set conditions for supervised visitation. He also ordered a forensic accounting to be completed within 30 days and allowed Anna to serve subpoenas for emails and bank transfers. Reading that order felt like a small miracle and a small victory. It didn't fix everything, but it put a pause on the damage. The next days were a blur. The bank sent confirmations. The freeze was in place. Claire agreed to testify and provide documents. The forensic accountants began tracing transfers. Each discovery revealed another layer. The funds routed through an intermediary firm. then to Cayman accounts that bore no relation to the ostensible contracts Christopher had cited. The more we found, the more coherent the story became. This had been planned, and Margaret's involvement, paper trails of deposits, and a beneficiary listed on a shell company looked less like coincidence and more like collusion. I called my mother. Margaret's name on the documents hurt in ways that names shouldn't. My mother offered quiet support, practical funds to cover the immediate rent shortfall, and a place to drop off the boy if I needed it. My mother said the kinds of things parents say to shore you up. You are not alone. We will get through this, and let the lawyers do their work. Those sentences, ordinary and steadfast, were balm. The situation escalated when Christopher attempted to return to the United States. He booked a flight back to Portland. He was listed on a manifest, and the ticket purchase showed up in a notification from an app. We learned about his arrival time because Anna had requested that the court be notified if he attempted to re-enter the jurisdiction. Airport legal teams are efficient when given a paper order. At the security desk, a customs official confirmed his identity against public records, and there he was, arriving in the glare of fluorescent lights, wheeling a suitcase and looking like a man who had expected a different kind of welcome. He was detained long enough for a legal team to serve him with the temporary restraining order and the custody papers at the airport. I wasn't there. I learned of it through a call from Anna. "He's been served," she said. "They won't let him leave the arrival hall until we sort this. The restraining order prevents contact with you and the child, pending further hearings." I felt a quick, fierce relief, like a wind that cleared smoke, followed by fatigue. Justice at that moment felt procedural, orders and stamps and signatures. But these were real protections. They meant he couldn't take the child and disappear again. The forensic accounting yielded more detail than I could have anticipated. The accountants traced transfers into accounts that had been seeded by deposits from Margaret's name and routed through shell companies that obscured ownership. The accountant's report, submitted in court, suggested possible identity fraud mechanisms and calls for civil penalties. The report used cautious language, alleged, and appear, because forensic accounting is careful. It must not leap beyond firm evidence. But it was clear enough to support further action. The state filed civil claims against Margaret for alleged facilitation and potential identity fraud. She was facing allegations, not convictions. That distinction mattered, legally and ethically, and Anna reminded me of it in each conversation. I remember sitting in a small conference room days later, watching Margaret sit across the table with her hands folded. She looked older than I had ever seen her, lined, exhausted. The questions were direct. She said she had tried to help her son in a way that made sense to her, that she had thought she was making sure the family would be okay. Whether those motivations excused the choices was for the court to decide. Margaret was now facing allegations of facilitating transfers and potential identity fraud charges stemming from the documents uncovered. The papers on the clipboard were dry and thick and full of the language of legal consequence. Court hearings after the emergency order were marked by a steady, almost bureaucratic accumulation of small facts that together formed a large truth. Christopher denied knowingly draining the account, offered explanations that shifted responsibility to clerical error or misunderstanding, and presented a narrative of wanting to start over in Dubai with Claire. The judge asked for bank login records, corporate HR files from Horizon International, and Claire's testimony on the record. Claire testified. She sat on a witness chair with a white affidavit and hands that trembled. She described messages, screenshots, and the dinner reservations. She said she had been in love with the idea of a new life. No one enters these stories simple or wholly malicious, and that when she realized the transfers were deeper than she had imagined, she had reached out to me. Her willingness to testify and to turn over documents was pivotal. It shifted the case from he said, she said, to a paper trail that the court could follow. There were hearing days that felt like they dragged on, and days that moved at the speed of a bullet. The judge ordered a temporary restraining order, protecting my physical space and limiting contact. He ordered supervised visitation for Christopher and required him to attend parenting classes and submit to a mental health evaluation before considering unsupervised access. The words were measured, the tone judicial, but the result was relief. The court took custody stability seriously and prioritized the child's welfare. On one afternoon, after a particularly tense hearing, I walked into the courthouse restroom while rain smudged the windows. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back had a face that had been worn thin by worry, dark circles and all. But there was something in her eyes I recognized: steadiness. The court orders had not healed everything. They had simply bought time and boundaries to rebuild. Money slowly started to come back. The forensic accounting team identified recoverable transfers, and the bank, under court order, began to reverse certain transactions. It wasn't immediate or total. Funds routed offshore require legal processes that move at measured speeds. But enough came back to cover several months of rent and allow me to sign a lease on a small, sunlit one-bedroom condo near the park. The plates on the kitchen cabinets were blank with the smell of new paint. My son loved the little balcony and the way light came in at 3 p.m. Stability arrived in small domestic details: a new set of sheets, a reliable stove, a desk where I could set up my design files again. Work was part of the healing. I had lost clients in the weeks after the text, some projects canceled as I scrambled. But as the court case settled into its procedural rhythm, old clients came back and new clients reached out because they liked my portfolio and they liked my reliability. Anna helped negotiate a release of some funds so I could pay childcare and accept a long-term contract, designing a catalog for a regional company. It was not the life of 3 years ago, but it was my agency returning. I started accepting more commercial work and booked a recurring client who respected my schedule as a mother first. I stayed cautious with the social part of life. People asked what happened. Acquaintances, neighbors, the woman at the coffee shop who remembered me as a mother with a stroller. I told them what I could without giving private details. I refused to let the story become a performance. Inside my living room, the boy and I built towers of blocks that he promptly knocked down. He learned to whistle with a plastic kazoo. One night he said, between mouthfuls of carrot sticks, "Mama, do you like my dinosaur?" And I felt something literal and hot in my chest. "Yes," I said, "I like it. I like you." Christopher, for his part, was legally constrained from immediate contact. The court's temporary orders remained in place while discovery continued. Ultimately, the case produced civil consequences: restitution hearings, orders for repayment of certain funds, and a mandate for Christopher to cooperate with the forensic accounting to determine the full scope of assets. The court's records reflected allegations of coordinated transfers and Margaret's involvement as significant. Margaret faced civil claims and was alleged to have facilitated transfers and potential identity fraud mechanisms. Charges were pending in civil filings and potential referral to criminal authorities for further investigation. Those were heavy words, and they were bounded by the careful language of the law. Alleged, facing claims, under investigation. The law moved deliberately. Allegations do not equal convictions, and the court reminded everyone of that balance. Over time, details solidified. Claire, after her cooperation, relocated quietly and changed contact information. She had made a choice that shifted the case. Whether she'd live with the consequences of that choice personally was part of her life story. I did not seek revenge. I sought safety and clarity for my son. That distinction mattered to me. The rebuilding phase was not a neat montage. It was 1,000 small decisions. I learned new budgeting habits, set up automatic transfers to an account in my name only, and worked with a financial counselor who helped me unpack the practicalities of estate and account protections. Anna and I worked to ensure that my son's legal protections were clear. The temporary full custody order eventually transitioned into a longer-term agreement that prioritized his stability, school continuity, and his relationship with other family members who were beneficial to his well-being. The process did not make his father vanish. It simply set the terms under which contact could safely resume if and when it was in the child's best interest. Years from that first rainy day, I can sit in the kitchen and watch the light slide across the hardwood. My son runs in with a scraped knee and a tale about a lost soccer ball. I sit down at my design desk and open files for a client who paid on time and trusted me to bring a vision to life. The house smells like cinnamon because I'm trying a new recipe. On some nights, I still open the folder of court documents, not to relive the pain, but to remind myself that the chaos had limits, and that there were laws and people who could put boundaries around harm. I don't tell everyone the whole story. It's mine and his and Anna's and a raft of people who did what they could. But when friends ask if I'm okay, I say, yes. It is honest. I am not the same woman who believed everything would be safe simply because it was familiar. I have scars and a ledger of lessons. I know now the precise mechanics by which one can try to move a life across borders, and I know how to rally evidence and people to slow, and sometimes reverse those moves. There was a moment, months after the frozen accounts and the first hearings, when my son and I took the bus to the park. He pointed to a plane cutting a white line across the sky and asked if that was where people went who didn't want to come back. I told him in a small, careful voice that sometimes people leave and sometimes they come back, and that our job is to take care of each other no matter what. He chewed his sandwich and declared the duck pond to be our pond, which made me laugh. If there's a lesson in this, it's twofold. First, trust your instincts. When things feel off, and not because of paranoia, but because of small, consistent dissonances, document, copy, and protect. Second, the law is imperfect but usable. Emergency orders, forensic accounting, and an attorney who knows how to articulate the problem can be the difference between being adrift and being anchored. Those tools won't erase pain, but they create space to rebuild. I can't promise you that the child's father will be in our lives in the way I once imagined. I don't know whether reconciliation is possible or desirable. What I can promise is this: we are enough. My son has his day, his laughter, a stable roof, and a mother who will fight like a person possessed to make sure he's safe. The rest, court orders, restitution, civil processes, are the scaffolding that let us rebuild. If my story moves you and you want to follow more real-life rebuilds, subscribe and join us. I share updates because I'm still learning how to live after a life rearranged. And for anyone watching who is in that first stunned hour with a phone in their hand, know this: breathe, document, call a trusted friend, and then call a lawyer. You do not have to face the paperwork alone. You are not alone in the rain.